Yeah.
Yeah, you'll lean out hella
Yeah.
quick if you do that.
So I read a long time ago. This is how it actually started. When we first started our business a little over 5 years ago, I was stressed. I had just signed a lease for 5 years at, $12,000+ a month, and for some people that might not be really stressful.
For who?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I
don't know anybody.
For me, I was like, boy, this better work.
Yeah.
We only had 6 months of money in the bank, and so I knew I had 6 months to figure it out, and I was really, really stressed. So I started reading a book on anxiety, and one of the things that stuck with me in that book is she specifically talks about how walking is one of the neurological things that you can do that reduces anxiety, because the part of your brain that processes anxiety, I'm going to script the science of it. I should know it by now. I've read it a million times. This is the amygdala, or that's what I think it is.
Amygdala? I love that you called it amygdala.
The McDonald.
What?
Amygdala, yes. I actually do know how to say it. I don't know why I said it.
I was like, that's hilarious.
Sometimes
Sometimes
I have a hard time with words. Like, there's a few that I still scribble all the time. Amy makes fun of me. I don't know why. I get stuck.
It sounds way cool.
It happened with I won't mention her name, but a girl that you kind of dated for a minute when we first met.
Yeah.
And her name was one thing, but then I saw it in writing as something else.
Yeah.
And I pronounced it incorrectly, and I couldn't stop pronouncing incorrectly, even though I knew her name.
Whoa.
I'll tell you after we're done with this, but I couldn't. I always said the wrong thing, and she'd correct me, and I'd be like, I know your name. I don't know why my brain's doing this. I do with Gorgonzola.
Gorgonzola, that's right.
Okay, great. I have to guess every time because usually I want to say Gorgonzola. Yeah.
No way, dog. That can't be real.
Another one is
it's not real.
It's real. Ask Amy. Another one is
Gorgonzola.
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with my brain. And another one is bocce ball. I always want to say bocce. Yeah, I always want to say bocce. Now I get it but I still have to pause.
I say the only word I think that I say like that that's weird is that I always call Lululemon. Because I remember
that just sounds more sophisticated.
Because when I first saw it, that's what I thought it was. I was like, oh, whatever. I was like, no way people would just jam two words together like that and they're both pronounced phonetically. I felt it had to have some sort of accent on the pronunciation.
Should.
But
so bocce ball, the way I do it in my head, I did it just now right before I said it, is I remember it by being like, ba, like a sheep, bocce ball. Otherwise, my brain, I don't know what it is. I do this every once in a while with certain words. I wonder if there's a name for it.
I can't. What for what you're doing?
Yes.
You know, we should look into it. It probably is a thing. But that's just crazy because, anyways. So
anyway, I read this, and she breaks down the science of it. Okay. And walking specifically, more so even than working out, engages the brain in a way in which you stop having anxiety because you need to focus on what's directly right in front of you. Right, so
it brings you to the present moment.
Yes. So walking is one of the things they most recommend for people who experience anxiety because yes, it brings you to the present moment, and it literally neurologically stops your brain from processing the things that are bringing you anxiety.
Right.
Right. So I started doing it for that reason, and I'd come back. I'd notice that I was overly stressed, and the bell curve had taking me off a ledge, and I'd be like, I got to go for a walk. And so that's when I started doing it, and now I've just incorporated it into my routine where if I have a phone call, I just take it on a walk for the most part, unless I need to be in front of a computer. Now I'm just fortunate in that a lot of my role allows for that, and also a lot of my role are things that I am naturally gifted at, like the gift of gab. Both of us. I can schmooze and answer questions and have a conversation at a whatever stage. What did you call it? Stage 2.
Oh yeah, zone 2.
Zone 2. So that I can almost on autopilot be like, yep, this is what we do. This is why we do it. Here's how it works. Here's how I think we could bring benefit to you. Blah blah blah. But it only started because I'd feel these deep pits of anxiety and stress and be like, I gotta get up.
Was that? I will say that it's kind of interesting because I have not known you to be so much of a in the last few years. I mean, obviously, probably since the business and the third kid, I would say I would notice that the pandemic really from like just being on the outside look, that seemed like the start of like when stress became like a larger player in your like health and stuff. Because I remember you went through those like, you know, chest pain things.
I do remember, yeah.
And I just remember there were like parts of your life where like I kind of known we were always going to be a little bit more anxious folks, but it never really seemed like debilitating or like it was interrupting your life. Would you say like in the last little bit, in the last like few years or so, like it's gotten more better or worse? Or do you feel like stress is now kind of an anxiety is like now a thing that you have to kind of consciously manage?
I think it's always been there.
Okay.
I just didn't know how to identify it. And it manifests different for me than what I had historically identified as anxiety.
Okay.
Right? So like for me, if I'm feeling anxious, I just power through it. And
what does that look like though?
Well, it historically looks like me like not admitting it was there. So how it usually manifests for me is I become less patient, less tolerant, less kind, compassionate, less present, right? All those things. But if you don't look closely, you could just say like, I'm focused or I'm just not a nice person, right? Like they're like, I mean, that's just the reality. Whereas for some people for anxiety, when they feel deep anxiety, it just manifests differently. Like it manifests in them not being able to function and operate. It doesn't do that to me.
Right.
I can still function pretty highly.
Yeah.
It's just there's shrapnel around me. Yep. So it affects the people around me more. And I almost defer dealing with it.
Oh, I literally think it's like a tremendous. I think anxiety and anger are tremendous energy pools. Mm-hmm. I think they are huge drivers for like needing to get shit done or wanting to get things done. I always say this, that like it is like those, because I've had anxiety for a long time, and I went through a major dissociative episode when I was like 22. And it lasted a year, and I just couldn't tell what was real. Yeah. And my counselor at the time was like, "Oh yeah, so that's like," I was like, "What's disassociation?" She goes, "Yeah, so that's like the baby of like depression and anxiety." And I'd never really had anything like that. And I'm always been a pretty upbeat guy.
Same.
But she goes, "I don't think this is really just because you're like depressed." She goes, and not that it would have been bad if it was. I just wanted to feel better. But she's like, "But what I really think it is you are extraordinarily stressed, and now it's manifested in this thing." Because I remember I smoked a J, I got way too stoned, and all of a sudden, like, my consciousness was ripping through the room, and I don't do good with dissociative states, altered states. All of a sudden, I'm just sitting there tripping balls, and then for the next year, I just couldn't find the ground. And it was rough. And then I got through it.
Must have been just wildly disorienting.
Oh, I mean, I would eat with my friends, and I would be like, I feel like this is a movie. None of it felt real. It all felt like I was in a dream. You know what I mean? It was like Matrix type vibes. Like I was just like, this isn't a real place. This isn't like a real conversation. It was so nuts. It was terrifying. So the thing is, like, when I got through it, I cannot remember the time. I just remember being on a porch somewhere, like, just having a full belly laugh with like one of my friends and being like, "Oh, I'm back!" Kind of fucking the hook scene, you know? There you are, Peter. It was like I was back. But that was awful. And I just remember that like through that time, it was so bad I couldn't power through. It was like I felt like I was more in the like pleasure-seeking phase because I just was so miserable all the time that I was staying up till 3 a.m. watching movie after movie. I couldn't sleep. I was, probably smoking more dope or hanging out with more, you know what I mean? Just like trying to do shit that felt good because I felt so fucking anxious. Do you feel like when you get anxious, it sounds like for you used to power through, but now what is like the healthy method that works for you in terms, I mean, walking sounds legit, but is there anything else that you do that you're like, this actually really helps?
Yeah, I think what I've tried to get better at doing is identifying whether it's good stress or bad stress.
Okay.
So I think stress and anxiety, I think my understanding right now in my own personhood, and this could be wrong, I could absolutely see in 10 years be like, nope, you were wrong, is it's almost like good fats, bad fats, and that like it's kind of confusing to know which is which all the time. And the only way you do is if you get really in tune with your body and learn and pay attention. And so I feel like I can tell now what's good stress versus bad stress before I'm directly in it. And then when I get directly into it, I can identify it. So like a trigger for me is when I notice myself being annoyed with everyone around me. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it's everyone else's fault. Now I'm like, oh, I know what's happening. You've overburdened yourself. You're stressed to an extent that you're perceiving everyone as potential enemies around you, essentially. Like everyone's a perceived threat. And the only common denominator is you. And so you got to find a way to step out of it. And sometimes it is as simple as going for a walk. That doesn't like jar me completely out of it, but it helps reset. It's like pressing reset or working out, reading.
Right.
And so I've had to create better systems in my life so that I handle stress instead of putting it off. Mm-hmm. There's all these ways we put off stress, particularly, in modern society because we have so many options. I can think that I'm relaxing when I spend 4 hours binging on Netflix. Or I can think that I'm like...
Yeah, that's a big illusion.
Yeah, there's all these things that we think...
When I'm playing video games, I'm relaxed. Or when I'm like drinking at the bar, I'm relaxed.
Yes.
Or when I'm... Yep.
Yes, and there's a difference between medicating and mitigating.
Yeah.
I just made that up. I'm not sure that actually works. But
yeah.
But I think I spent most of my college, early 20s medicating instead of mitigating the stress. And so I just was pressing pause on it, and it just would keep on piling up and piling up and piling up, and it's like a snowball effect, right? So you get 5 years down the road and you have 5 years worth of stress and anxiety and fears that have accumulated, and you haven't dealt with any of them. Whereas now I think I'm just trying to get better at identifying whether it's good or bad stress, and then if it's bad stress, finding a way to deal with it in ways that are healthy to me, and if it's good stress, figure out how to utilize it to move me forward. Because I do think culturally too, I think we interpret all stress and anxiety as bad. I think Instagram and social media has really elevated this idea of like leisure is life.
Yeah, or that like that there is a way to sustain like this kind of bliss state.
Yes. And that thing doesn't exist. That's called heaven or whatever your version of that is, right? Like it's not realistic. It's not life. And also, if you ever got to a point where all you had to do was go on vacation forever and ever, then somebody else is paying the cost for that because you're not contributing to society anymore. And so I think...
and maybe what it is, and I don't know, I'm not trying to know because I want to, but I also wonder if what it is too, it's very much cultural. Because I do think, like, if we were to talk about, just to make this point, if a lack of stress were somehow that which enabled a person to be happiest, then third world countries which experience dynamic, nightmarish stress would be the least emotionally sound, happy, and fulfilled people. And yet, from my understanding, that they are on par with the most affluent nations, if not in some ways exceed them in terms of their satisfaction and not satisfaction, I shouldn't say that, but with the happiness of being alive and being with the people they're in. And what's weird is to encounter people that have all resources and opportunity and options, and that they don't find it, but they certainly pursue that kind of, like you said, that bliss state. So it's just, I think, an important point to make because it's something that, like, I remember reading that, and for me, I was like, I think it woke me up to the reality of, like, maybe you just have a dog shit perspective. Like, maybe that's what's impacting your ability to find joy in your life, despite it being stressful, is you have somehow shrunk your perspective, or you're having a belief that somehow it shouldn't be this way, or it shouldn't be you, or you shouldn't be undergoing this, or there should be some quick fix for it. And I don't know if that's true or not. I just know for me that it did change my perspective on, like, it's not going to be having more, and it's not going to be having necessarily less stress. The game must be, like, how you see that. What's the story you write about that stress? So I think it's interesting when you say good stress and bad stress. But anyways, keep going. I just think
I'm kind of spitballing here too, and so I'll wrap up too because I have a couple of things I want to ask you as a follow-up. But you are right. I mean, I don't have the data in front of me, and we don't have a producer to like fact check it, so it could be wrong. But my understanding, and I'm almost positive this is right, is the more affluent the nation, often the higher rates of mental illness. So like suicide, mental illness in general, and some of that could be you can identify it, but like, there's a reason, and without like again, this could be wrong, but I think there is an element in which sometimes when we get what we want, it wasn't actually what we needed or what we thought we wanted, right?
Yep.
Right. So I think there is an element of that. I finished a while back a book called The Comfort Crisis that kind of dives into all this and how culturally our society is, everything we do is structured around removing discomfort, not embracing it. From the buildings we walk into, to the cars we drive, to the food we eat. It's just a constant and never-ending pleasure-seeking process. So we're constantly looking for anything to make our lives easier, which is why we have air conditioning, and it's why we have leather seats.
About the air conditioning thing.
And all that isn't bad.
No.
Those are great
inventions. Great technological advances. The
problem is when we spend our entire lives trying to remove discomfort, then when we butt up against it, we think it's automatically, innately wrong. And most of the things that make us feel good in the future are uncomfortable in the present.
That's generally true.
And most of the things
at least for me,
that make us feel good in the present bring us discomfort in the future. And so
like watching, even just like sitting up watching 4 hours of Netflix when you know you should fucking be in bed, then you wake up in the morning, now you're tired of the whole day's shit. Versus going like, okay, I'm not really wound down, but I should probably go to sleep now. And then you do it, and then you wake up in the morning like, actually, I feel rested today. I could get after it. It's just
it's
counterintuitive.
It's a bummer that it's like that sucks that that's the human condition, but it is.
Well, I think it is also too, because there is somebody in some group out there saying like that this bliss state is like achievable. That like, I mean, someone out there has to be pitching this idea.
You can get here too.
And what I'd say is maybe if you have the right innate brain chemistry, the resources and funds, a lack of responsibility and duty, and maybe the right cocktail of drugs, you can find your way to this permanent bliss state.
Maybe, but then it's just a Ponzi scheme, right? Because then we're just on a pyramid.
Right.
Because in order for this person to get here, they have to climb up and over all these people who are doing things in order for them to achieve this life.
Right.
And so it actually becomes, like that bliss becomes inequitable, because once you got to that spot, then I would argue your responsibility as a human would be to help other people rise up the pyramid, which then does what? Brings you discomfort. So
because it's like that movie Elysium with Matt Damon, where like there's this place where there's no sickness.
Hop into a tanning bed and cure cancer.
Boom. And it's like everyone else in the world is just trying to hold on to their limbs. It's so wild. You know what I mean? So like I do, and the lack of feeling at the top to be like, but I mean, now you're talking about something that I personally think is like a foundational concept of my reality, which is mutuality, which is like the Kingian notion of the garment of destiny, that like everybody's tied. And
I am who I am because of who we are.
And I can't be good unless you're good, and you can't be good unless I'm good. Like I fundamentally believe that.
Me too.
I think the tricky thing is that, and I think that's where like I look at so many people, is like some of that advice is coming from like taking advice in that way, or at least seeing it. For me, it hasn't felt very useful, because like I look at my life and it feels so disparate from the people that have these platforms. Like I'm like, where is like where is the like single dad who's trying to hold it together, whose like bank account is always on zero, and he's trying to find like the best way to care for his friends.
He doesn't have time to post on social.
Right, exactly. And then it's like, and even if he did, the point still remains that like, I don't think that even I, in the position I'm in, would ever even argue that the point or the greatest satisfaction I've had in my life was on the other side of chasing bliss. And I remember like listening to Stephen Thomas, my stepdad, because he's a neurologist, and he was saying, I was telling him, I was like, I think one of the things I learned in my mid-20s, which saved me from just, I think, a life of just chaos, was realizing that, I mean, from listening to him and him saying like, I want you to know that like one of the largest, because I was telling him like, I feel this, or I feel this, and he's like, it's not that feelings aren't important. They're data and information, and they should inform decision as a factor. But what he tried to tell me was, he was like, your brain isn't designed to sustain emotional states. It's literally, in fact, designed to do the opposite on a very specifically. He's like, for instance, when I was in my 20s, my mother died, and it wiped me out. And he's like, I lost 30 pounds in like 6 months. I could barely function. I was going to work. I had no social. I couldn't talk to a person. I was just in a monstrous state of grief. Fortunately, the brain does not abandon the memory, but the emotional intensity of that experience dwindles over time. And I was able to, one, laugh again, find love, experience joy in life, see the beautiful things in life. And that grieving process was really hard, but I'm always so grateful because I still get to love my mom. I still miss her, but it doesn't work on me at that same gravity. And he goes, one of the issues with chasing feelings is that your brain is literally designed to abandon them. So the problem with chasing it is there is no state, none, which a human mind can sustain.
It's like holding air.
And he goes, and if you can, it's actually because you have either a brain injury or a brain chemistry issue. So he's like, so depression is the capacity to hold on to a state for an extended period of time. It's tremendously burdensome because they can take all the right steps to achieve mental health, but the chemistry of their brain will not allow the normal process to occur in the way memories and emotions are stored. So they sit here in this feeling. Sounds like a living hell, right?
Yeah.
But my dad's like, but
You're
for the
trapped, literally in a prison.
Right. He goes, but the problem is
prison.
the rest of us that have that kind of like normative brain, we take that course to be like, oh yeah, so I felt happy doing this, so I'm just going to do it more. But the problem is, one, you not only get less of a high because of the way dopaminergic receptors work in the brain, but number two, you still can't sustain it. You can't hold it. No matter how high you climb up that pyramid. The thing is, if you have a normal brain, it will abandon that state. And it's so weird because he goes, it's not that it's trying to throw you down into the hole, but I think it also, once I heard that, it shifted my perspective of going, that sounds like folly, just to be like, I'm going to try to be happy all the time. And I think what I think now more than ever, and I would be interested to know this, is that I find that actually when I do that, my stress is up way more. Like you ever like have like a thing you're really looking forward to, like maybe it's like a date with you and Amy, or maybe it's like a time with the kids or a trip, and then shit starts to go wrong, and because you had projected in your mind that this is going to go this way and thus I will be happy because it will and then it doesn't, and now you're fucking in the hole and like,
it's a house of cards.
What a waste. Whatever. It ruins it. Instead of like trying to more like in a tempered way walk in and go, this should be fun, but I expect it to have the same obstacles as any human endeavor does. Yeah. Eventually, there's some shit that's not going to go right. And then when it does, it almost feels blissful in a way because you're like, and that's what it is. Like you kind of see a thing for what it is. Like, we talk a lot about how the joy in life's in the mundane.
Yes.
When you stop, at least for me.
The novel and the novelty.
Yeah. And for me, all of a sudden I feel like I get a better experience of my life with less stress when I'm able to kind of be present to whatever it is.
Yeah, and this is like, there are obviously, well, maybe I should say this. None of this is in any way a way to diminish like people who are experiencing real pain, right? There are real
They're
problems.
Not connected. This is not connected.
There are real problems in the world.
This is not connected.
That are hard for people.
Yeah.
And it's not even to diminish the reality that life is hard. It's just, for me, I've gotten better at managing and mitigating my stress. Yes. Once I've been able to accept that life is not meant to make me happy, that existence is supposed to be hard, and the better I am at accepting that reality, the more present I can be. So like this was even like having kids. This was probably the hardest thing for me having kids was realizing that my life was no longer just my own. So I'd miss out on something. I think I logically knew that, but then
it happened and it kind of shook you for a bit.
But then it starts happening. You're like, I have to miss this. I have to miss that. And like 8 p.m. rolls around and you don't get to just clock out.
Sure.
You got to get your kids to bed and brush teeth and bring water 17 times because like if they don't get this glass of water, they're going to have to go to the hospital. Like all that stuff. And so until you're in it, it's hard to
fully see.
You can logic it, but you can't experience it. It's not the same. And so for me, I had to get to a point where I had to accept that life was hard. And for me, for the people in my life that seem to have the hardest time existing or the most challenges around them, it is this expectation that eventually life will get easy.
Yeah.
And it just, that's not the way it works.
That's not what I've seen.
Yeah. And in fact,
it would be sick if like you knew that every year over year, your life was going to increasingly get better.
You're just like compounding interest?
Yeah, like you're just eventually, this is going to be a cakewalk. Yes, it's not necessarily worked out that way so
no.
far.
Well, and like the stakes get higher, right? We get older and relationships get harder and people experience heartbreak and grief and they lose parents and then eventually we'll lose friends. Like it gets harder. It doesn't get easier. Maybe some of the like day-to-day gets easier because you create systems that help you through, but the stakes keep on getting higher and higher and higher.
Yeah.
And until you die.
Yeah.
What would you say you stress out about the most? Categorically.
Oh, Huck.
Okay.
My son. I don't care about anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not true.
I mean, I do, but not near. They're not even
Yeah.
the same tier.
Yeah.
Like I could lose my house tomorrow and be fine if I knew Huck was good.
Yeah.
I could live on the street for the rest of my life if I knew my son was good. So like that for me is the most burdensome thing when I think he's not doing good. When I think the world will be unfair to him. Like this last week, we were supposed to record a podcast, and I had to call and be like, I can't do it, and yada yada or whatever. And just Huck having some really dynamic challenges with certain things, and it's not like he's cognitively normal, but he just really struggles with language, and he doesn't get that from me, right? And so it's really tough because it makes all of school hard, and learning challenging and memorizing challenging and articulating what happened and how you're feeling and what you need. It's all on language. And the tricky part is like I can only see so much. I can only perceive so much in the nonverbal. And that makes his life tricky in some ways. And I'm always working to not stress him, but whatever. And that stuff is like, it's the part that is the most stressful. Like I could fight a war off of sometimes the stress and anger that I feel around watching him struggle, and I try not to do it around him, but like there'll just be times where so like that for me is the one. My son and his capacity, I have no interest. I don't care whether he makes $1 million or he's a tight. I really don't care what he does, but what I want him to be is a human being who has the capacity for options, choices, and choices require some capacity to deal with diverse things. And right now he just has those challenges, and I just don't want it to limit him. So that's probably the most stressful thing.
What's the big, I'll ask this two different ways, but what's the big fear behind that? And then what's the, like, there's a show called This Is Us. I'm sure you're familiar with it. We haven't watched it all, but The Best Couple. Everyone's going to know who The Best Couple is without me saying it. I can't remember their names.
Me neither.
The Best Couple. They play a game sometimes that is like worst case scenario. It's like something bad happens in their family and they go down the path like what's the worst case scenario. Yeah. And then it's actually a really like healthy human exercise because every time they do it, it's TV obviously. Mm-hmm. But if you practice it in real life, when you walk down the worst case scenarios, they're always highly unrealistic. Yeah. Right? So like in your brain, like when you, like last week, when you're upset about the dynamic, what's the like worst case scenario and the fears that are happening internally for you?
It's all like long game stuff. So like when you're little, you don't need to develop a significant social self, especially as a boy, because it's primarily physical, athletic, common interest-based socialization and relationship. Girls don't need to be familiar, easy to talk to or whatever, because boys mature in different rates, and that stuff also matters to boys at different times. But then what starts to happen is as they age, what interests people grows more complex. It gets more nuanced. Games are one of the major ways young people connect, especially 6 and under, and your ability to grasp more and increasingly complex games, plus the whole social world, is a major factor on whether you fit in or don't, if you can navigate it. And then if you can't, you start to shrink your friend group dynamically. And then if you can't continue to do that, then it's like you miss out on birthday parties. You're the odd duck. You don't get invited on the sports team. You end up a more ostracized and lonely kid. Then all of a sudden the stakes raise because school's only ever getting more intense. The social dynamics are only getting more intense as you continue to kind of slip greater and greater into further and further isolation and oddity. And I knew kids like that in school, and I remember watching it happen to them. And I'm like, I remember that we used to talk to this kid back when we were in 6th grade. Nobody talks to him now. It's not because he's a bad kid. It's because he couldn't keep up. And we did, and it wasn't we were trying to be mean or unkind to him. The nature of the social world is like runs with like, generally, right? Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be common interest or personality, race, color, creed, or orientation. It's capacity to relate. It's capacity to relate. So like your ability to be friends with a person of a diverse background is also in some way tied to your ability to connect and relate and how skillfully you can do that. The more skillfully you can do that, the more people you can pull into a room. The larger your social network, the larger your influence, the more friends you can ally with and make. And the less gifted you are on that, generally, the more isolated you become. And that, if it's a choice, is one thing. To kind of be the person who's like, I kind of like a quiet life and I want to blah, blah, blah. But I knew people who desperately like wanted it. And I think right now what we know about young men and young people is loneliness is a major fucking nightmarish factor. And it stresses me out so badly to think about my son in a world where he could have 5,000 social media friends and no one who fucking knew like what he did that day, really. No one who really called him was like, what's up, dog? You want to go get a burger? Hey, man, you want to go like shoot some hoops or whatever? That kind of shit will make me cry if I think about the possibility of that. So that's worst case scenario. And the problem is, like, for me, it doesn't feel all that unrealistic. It feels like a thing that I feel like definitely could happen. And then I feel hell-bent, undying, like, determination that it never will. I'll make sure. But it's just like, yeah, it's terrifying.
So if you had to, like, I mean, really boil it down, you're worried he'll be lonely.
That's the primary thing. I'm worried he'll be lonely.
That's the fear.
Yeah. And that like is a real thing, you know? So I'm like, I'm not like, I don't care about the money. I don't care about like any of that stuff. I'm more like, you could have a great job, dog. You could make $200,000 a year. I don't give a fuck. If you go home and you are deeply lonely, dude, it'll kill me. Because I think my son is so valuable and such a unique, interesting human being, even if he's not a great communicator, even if he doesn't have all the words I have. So I'm like, I think people would be missing out on him. And I think, you know, it would gut him because as a person who doesn't have as many words, he has an overactive emotional center. And so the thing is, like, he feels everything so deeply. So rejection to him is like a hammer, you know? Where for someone who's maybe more intellectually sophisticated, you're like, oh, yeah, you're fucking lame. I have other friends. And I can make a new friend. I can make it.
But you know, like, it'll hurt his feelings the first time he isn't invited somewhere.
In some ways, yes. It's only if he cares. If he cares about that person and then they leave him out, you wiped him out because he won't understand. He won't understand why. And if it's something simple like, hey, it's because you know, whatever, you haven't seen each other in a while, whatever. But if it's like, well, okay, well, bud, it's because they're going to go do a thing. And that thing you kind of can't do. So you don't have the choice as whether you want to participate or not. You're not allowed in because you can't do it.
Yeah.
That's awful. To me, that's awful. So, yeah. That's what I hope. I mean, like, he already has to get sectioned off to go to reading group. He already has to get sectioned off, whatever. So he's already away from his classmates now. Now you're in a special class. Now it's a reduced number of people. Yada, yada. And that should just, if it compounds, you just end up in an odd space, you know? And that's like, I hate that.
Yeah.
You know, like I was when I took him to preschool, I even asked the teacher before I'd even put him in the preschool. I'm like, would you have kids here with special needs and in the class? She goes, no, because they would require a different environment. I was like, I disagree. So we won't be here. No offense. I was out. Yeah. I was like, still a person. They might have a million words, but they have all the feelings. They have all the things. Yeah. And like, that's how I feel about Huck. Because I'm like, wherever he goes, I'm like, in the same way for him, if he saw someone with special needs or someone that had difficulty communicating, whatever, I'm like, you should try to connect. You should not be, you know.
They have we tried to get Cleveland into this preschool when we were applying for preschools or trying to get to preschool, and it's either free or really cheap, but it's at UW, and the preschool mixes, it's not quite half and half, but it mixes kids with special needs with kids without special needs. Yeah. Because what they're learning, at least what they walked us through in this, is it elevates everyone. Yep. So it
dramatically expands the most important characteristics of a
empathy.
Person. Yes.
So it makes the kids that are there way more empathetic and socially intelligent, the ones that don't have the same challenges, and then it raises the socialization of the kids who do have challenges because they're around these kids who also become more empathetic because of their environment, because that's how we're wired. We're wired to help each other win in the tribe. It's interesting to just, like, talking through fears is always interesting, and your fears are all really valid. As someone who, like, watches Huck, who isn't his father but deeply cares about him, I get this benefit, but I just never worry about him in that way. Because he also is the things you said he is. He's such a feeler, and he's like highly likable. Like the things that are probably challenging for him also really endear him because like he does really well with my oldest, who's like the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Like
million words,
yeah. Highly communicative, highly emotional, highly sensitive, but like words. And now they're the same age, but now like I think highly intelligent, manipulative without being mean about it, but like you can see what she's doing from a mile away, where she's like trying to figure out her angle.
Yeah.
And they work really well together because Huck doesn't have like strong opinions about what they do.
No.
But he's just really kind.
Yeah, Huck's
and loving.
He's an easy goer, yeah.
And loving.
Yeah.
And so like in my like outside view, like there will always be a place for Huck, maybe not in every group, but in groups, because that levity and calmness, the thing that neither one of us have, we both really value people like that.
Oh, 100%.
So I'm always like, I think your fears are really valid. I just think what he has to offer the world is really helpful and endearing. And so I think he'll find these pockets where the value he's going to bring is the kind, loving, compassionate, sensitive, quiet soul.
Yeah.
Like he has those things innately in him. I wonder, maybe you can answer this. I wonder if part of the like challenge for you, and this would be for me too, is the things that he's really good at are more your opportunities, and the things that are more opportunities for him you're really good at. Does it feel like you like words? Like you talked about like his, but like like you guys are almost yin and yang.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
And so if I had that dynamic, I think a part of me would be worried that I could teach him what he needed to learn because of our skill sets were so different.
That you couldn't or could?
Couldn't.
Oh no, I don't think I can. I don't think Huck will ever be like me.
That's what I mean.
kind of gave
like,
that away
hard,
a long
like,
time
like
ago.
Is that part of the like hard part of it?
No. I think what it is that it's really pretty straightforward. Up until 3rd grade, you learn to read, and after 3rd grade, you read to learn. So it's not really that I'm like stressed about whether he ever communicates like me or not. Okay. I don't care.
Okay.
I don't want him to hate school for the next thing. I don't want him to end up lonely at school. I don't want him to end up lonely in life. I don't want him to have no choices in what he'd like to do with his life. I don't give a shit if my son is ever like me, has any common interests, because the joy of my life is that Huck is different than me. He's unique. And I like love that he is what he is, so that I get the chance to just like see and like embrace it. I can only introduce him tragically to what I know, and I try to introduce him to stuff that I never did. You know, fortunately, I was also a kid with ADD, so I did a lot. But I also so he gets a lot of different exposures. But I try to do that. I try to pay attention to where he feels excited. But I don't have any worries about that. That like, oh, I can't turn him into me, or I can't teach him how to do this. I'm like, I don't care. I don't want you to hate this thing that like you now have to do for the next 10 fucking years. Like, I don't want you to just be like every day seeing my boy, and that the thing that's burdening him is 9 months of the year he is in basically the 7th circle of hell in school. And you knew kids like that.
Yeah,
that kind of stress.
And they just never fit that's the reason that that's actually the primary reason I don't worry about them the same way you do, which that's your job. And I think as parents we always
like the stress from that shit, dog.
We look for the weakest, the chink in their armor.
Right.
That's what we look for as parents. My fears are the same. My fears, I'm not looking at all the things, and this is probably most of life. I'm not looking at all the things they do well and thinking about them and dwelling about them. I'm trying to identify the chinks in their armor that could hurt them. This is a
survival tactic, bro.
I know. It's but it's not particularly healthy. You know, like my fear for Maverick is the opposite. I don't worry about his ability to connect and learn and all that, but he's going to be small. And I don't know how athletic he'll be.
Right.
And that is a massive currency for males in our culture.
Sure.
Is how big, strong, fast, and athletic you can be. And so if he can't be those things, will that hamper him? Will that make him feel like
we both knew that's bullshit. I would say this. We both know that right now there has also never been a larger section of more rewarded people that don't have athletic ability than at any time.
Yes.
Like when I was younger, when I was in fucking 5th grade, bro, the second you stepped on out of recess, it was like you could either hoop or you couldn't. You could either play tag or you couldn't. But nowadays, it's like, bro, you get up to recess. When Huck tells me at recess, like, what he does with all his friends, he's like, yeah, I played soccer today for a little bit, played football. I was like, and then what'd you do? He's like, then we got with all the Pokemon kids, and we did that and blah, blah. And I was like, I think that it's a little more diverse now that it wasn't back then, because what was available to a child in terms of resources that wasn't athletic was also dramatically reduced. It was like, hey, at recess time, we're going to make kids go and run, when this kid's like, I mean, I like to go outside and play and stuff, but I'm not going to be the best athlete, but I also want to be able to do all these things. Those all exist now. They didn't exist back then. Like,
yes, but I have, again, a hyper, like emotionally intelligent older. Yeah. And she talks to me about the kids that get fucked with at first grade.
It's tough.
And the
Inside
kids,
track, how's it going?
And the kids in first grade that get messed with are the same as they were when we were in school, which is small and different, right? So like she has a boy in her class who dresses different and doesn't like sports. And even in a highly sensitive, I mean, about as highly sensitive as you're going to get, where she goes to school in the city of Seattle.
Yep.
Not just in the city of Seattle, but she goes to an immersion school, which is half one language and half the other. So she spends half her day in Spanish, half her day in English. It's very, very like aware and progressive in all the ways that you would identify. Even in that environment, there's only so much control teachers can have. And so the same kids that get picked on when we were young are the same kids that get picked on now. And so she'll come home and tell me stories of who, and then we talk about ways in which she can be true to herself but still advocate for those people. So like maybe that's not directly like being like, stop picking on so-and-so and putting her body in the way. But maybe
classic
it's
Disney movie stuff.
But maybe it's identifying them and inviting them to play or like Cleveland gets asked to do play dates like all the time. And in one of our initial like parent-teacher conferences when she was in kindergarten, one thing they said was that Cleveland plays well with everyone. And if they even kind of like asked, like, if it's possible, it'd be great if you guys were willing to schedule play dates with her and other kids, because she is really good at engaging with a diverse population. And I'm only saying that this isn't like a look how awesome our kid is.
Sure it isn't.
It's more of a like it's more of a I thought what you thought. I thought what you thought.
I did.
That might be the case.
I mean, that's what I would have thought.
And maybe
that's what Huck's telling me. So like, but also again, Huck doesn't have all the words. He wouldn't remember.
And he's big, strong, fast. Yeah. He's athletic, and so he isn't that link. And we have, I think what you're saying is true, but we have hundreds of thousands of years within our DNA that's programmed us that fastest, biggest, strongest wins. So, like, again, but like the things that you worry about with Huck and things I worry about with Maverick, they're actually, they don't necessarily have to be logical completely to be fears. Yours are.
I think yours is too. Yeah. I mean, I like, now that you're saying it, it totally is. I guess I had thought that like even the other day when you're like, what'd you get picked on for? And you were like, reading? And it killed me. It killed me. But I mean, I think that stress stuff around Huck, like you said, in those fears, they don't have to be necessarily rational. But the reason it's so significant is because it's the only thing I really love more than myself. And I think for me, like when you said that, like one of the big stresses and your stress in your life took off dynamically is when you had kids. That for me was a liberation. I was actually very stressed when I was by myself. I was like, I don't do well, like left to my, like I am totally the guy where like, okay, I'm off, like you took my son from me and now I don't have him for 3 days. The first day's fun. The next 2, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know why I need him. Like, I'm like, I don't, what am I going to sit here and do? You know what I mean? And at my age, you can only jerk off so much before you're just exhausted.
You gotta take that tea, man.
No, the honest truth is, like, there's just not cool shit to do in the way that, like, stuff that matters to me anymore. It's like I could only work out so long. I can only work on creative projects so long before I'm like,
pick up your house.
yeah, and I'm like, or go out with my friends or whatever. I'm like, eventually there comes a point where I'm like, man, the best thing in my life and the phase of life I'm in very much that I'm like very connected to is being a dad. And
Yeah.
I'm already kind of trying to work on letting that go a little bit in my identity because it's already kind of fading in some ways. But I do think like that was a liberation. That wasn't an increase in stress. It was like how we always talk about it's the problem you wanted to solve.
Right.
I think one of the other dynamics is not really having my dad show up and be really around. And then when he was around, it being really hard. That, for me, I think made it so that when I had Huck, I was so excited that I was like, no matter how sketchy and nuts it gets, I'm just never going to bail. I'm just locked in. And I think that is a perspective thing, not like whatever. And I'm not saying that what you're going through, trust me, there have been times in my fucking parenting where I'm like, oh boy, I don't want to do this, or oh god, I lost that, and I didn't get to go to that thing, or this stressed me out. But by and large, having the kid and it taking all this time of mine felt like I was kind of like, yes, cool. I didn't even care about what I was doing before. You know, like it was fun maybe, but I was just like, it was so empty kind of, you know?
Yeah.
That it was like when I all of a sudden was like, oh shit, I got to change another diaper. I got blah, blah, whatever. I knew that at the end of those days, I would always, like when I'd tuck him in at night, I'd always just feel like,
yes,
what a great use of my fucking time.
Yes.
And that felt so liberating to me in some way where I would go to bed. I can remember the feeling of going to bed at like 24, like,
what do I do tomorrow?
what the fuck am I going to do tomorrow? You
Yeah.
know? I mean, I would go down to a basketball court and I would play pickup games for 8 hours. Like, that's what I was trying to do with time. Like, I just didn't have, you know. So, anyways. And then
and I similarly, like, I think it did both for me. It elevated this. I think it just elevated the stakes for me.
Yeah.
Too, like we talked about earlier. Like, I got more anxious because I just had way more to lose.
Yeah.
So, and way more to, like, I think my biggest fear in life, for the most part, I think, is that I'd screw up being a dad. I mean, that's the biggest thing for me, is I'm always worried. I finally.
You don't just think you're going to?
Like
not in an irredeemable way, but you don't like think in your head already that like I've
the
blown
irredeemable.
It. Okay.
Like all like
if someone asked me, I'd be like, oh, I already blew it.
Like
just like I'm killing myself.
I dropped the ball. Like if my kids got to their 20s,
yeah,
and they didn't want relationship with me.
Oh yeah, buddy, we'd both be dead. It would kill us.
It would kill me.
It would kill us.
It would kill me.
Yeah.
And sometimes I see glimpses of ways in which that could unfold.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll make a decision or yell too loud or say a thing, and I'll be like, "That's it. I did it."
Damn.
I know.
Damn. So what I know is this. I feel like I know when I leave a scar. But I can see that. But I also think I know what it is for me. Like this. It sounds weird, but I'd say this. I could connect with any parent of mine, no matter how hard they were as a parent. And the only thing I'd need from them, I think, especially as I've gotten older and wiser, is the acknowledgement that like that kind of behavior can't go on in my adulthood. And tragically, in my situation, that's not going to happen. So that's how I don't connect, because there is no evolution. There's no acknowledgement of what was. So then all that can happen is the same preconditions for it to happen again. I can never let it. Therefore, it doesn't continue. That relationship doesn't exist. Yeah. I think the one thing is that even the scars I have are made worse solely by the fact that, you know, certain things were unwilling to be fixed or acknowledged.
They just don't get healed.
Changed, yeah.
They get reopened.
Yeah, and I only say it as an encouragement only because I can tell even in myself, if even to this day at my age, if, you know, my pop was like, hey, man, we're gonna square away all this stuff. Dude, I'd be jacked. You know what I mean? And so that's where I kind of think like, I just don't think you're gonna get there in that way. I think you're gonna hurt them for sure.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I will. I know, like I can vividly remember even facial expressions, moments, times where I'm like, oh no, that was a scar. I fucked up that one.
That's a good way to say that. Because yes, I'll see the scar, and then I don't know how you react, but I immediately just feel shame.
Oh,
like I did something. I did something the other day, and Amy actually was like, "I didn't like that," and I was like, "I didn't like it either."
I didn't like that.
And then she was like, "Are you upset with me for saying that?" And I was like, "No, I feel shame.
Yeah,
I feel really shitty.
yeah,
I just screwed up, and I said it in a way that I should not have, and I."
Oh yeah, I mean, I get confronted with that stuff all the time. I think my own or any partners I've had or people that have been around, you know, even my sisters and stuff like that. And I'm always so grateful for their voice, because I think you and I have that where we want to do great with our kids. And the stress of not being able to do your best consistently is very frustrating.
It's not do the great just with our kids. Like, we have the thing that, like, if I make any mistake,
oh yeah,
there's nobody that will be harder on me than me.
Yes, no.
Even like the thing I did with the scheduling this morning. Immediately, I messed up.
Right.
I got to fix it.
I still think at the end of the day, even when you make those mistakes and we have those moments, I think the one thing that I am really aware of is that, like, yes, I could be really hard on myself, and yes, I can like really take myself to kind of like the cleaners when I make mistakes, and even especially when it's something that I know I should do or it should be done differently. The one thing I think that's been like really helpful is just to try to remind myself that like it's like any other relationship you have in your life, and it feels, especially with kids, because it feels so different than any other one, and in a lot of ways it is, but I think with me I try to pay attention to the fact that like it's no different in that you are certain to error, and your ability to be clear, vulnerable, and honest about the mistakes you make is what lays the foundation for the relationship to continue to grow and build. It actually isn't, just like anything we know about human psychology, it isn't actually built on perfection. It's built on the navigation of the imperfections that either communicate this relationship is sustainable or it's not.
Yeah.
And so like the best relationships in my life have conflicts, errors, problems, whatever, but I trust those people that when they blow it, that when I blow it, that they know I'm gonna do the work of being like, hey, that wasn't my best card there. I'm sorry, and I'm aware of that. And going forward, I'm going to do that differently.
Yeah.
That kind of, because it shows that you respect that other person, that you were, you know what I mean, and that also too, that you also can't. You're not just leaving without being like, and you're good. You're like, no, I definitely have a part of that I could have done better.
Yeah, I do that with my kids.
Right, I do too, and
especially Cleveland, because she's the one. We're the ones that
who will
the
bring
most.
up other stuff and go like, but you did this and you.
Well, not even that. Just she's the most aware, and we butt heads the most. She's like, it's like I made me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like the other day, we went out. We had like some one-on-one time, and I acknowledged my gap, and I was like, "Hey, the other day when I said this to you, it was not okay. It's unacceptable for Dad, regardless of whether he's your dad or not. It's unacceptable for me to speak to you that way, and I want you to know that I don't think it's okay." And you know how sometimes when you make a decision and you get a little embarrassed, that's what I felt. After I said it to you, I felt embarrassment. I felt shamed. I felt bummed and sad that I spoke to you in a way that I shouldn't have. And I want you to know that I do not think it's okay. I want you to know I'm sorry, and that I will continue to try and get better and better and better about how I react when I'm frustrated with you. And she seemed really receptive. And even in fact, she was like, "It's okay." And I was like, "No, I want you to know that it's not okay. It's not okay that."
And you're also helping them. I mean, that's like, I think that's so important, because I do that with Huck all the time. because one, I just think it's so important that he doesn't have a bloated sense of who I am any more than is just innate inside of a child with their parent. Like, I don't want to be the father that was never wrong. That doesn't feel like a good role.
Yeah, like Zeus.
Yeah, I'm like, I want it to be an infallible thing. I'm like, that is not who I am, and I want to kind of kill that illusion as quick as possible so that there can be a greater sense of equanimity between us as he ages. Like, that your voice matters and your perspective matters, as does mine, because I'm not right all the time. So if my perspective is the only one that matters, the problem is you're dealing with someone who's very fallible, who can do shit wrong and make mistakes. It's not a good person to base singular declarations of what's good and not, right and wrong, how it should go and shouldn't off that one person. And I want that kind of relationship where he feels like dad's a person we can like process together and work through things. But I also think it's a thing that like I never had. And I know that for me, the largest stress I remember feeling is like when dad would get angry and then blow up and then not say anything. I would be afraid of the next time. The person became very unpredictable to me, because it was also like, and that's still the same energy, still wildly unpredictable, because none of it can get acknowledged. So since none of it can get acknowledged, I have no clue what's going to trigger it, how's it going to happen, what happens, what you think about it.
It can never change.
Do you think
can't
it's
change what's not acknowledged.
Do you think it's going to be good? Do you think it's okay to do it? Do you not? Do you care enough about me to right? Like all that stuff, all those questions remain unanswered. If I'd had someone who'd been like, hey, here's the deal, that's not okay, I blew it, then I would have also gained an internal sense of knowing, as said by the largest authority in my life, of what passes and what doesn't. And when they did it again, I'd be like, oh, you're wrong. And I would know now because you said you were wrong. That would change the way I felt about it. And I think it would reduce my fear, where it would enable me to kind of almost place a barrier there. Like, okay, I would still be scared probably a little bit, because it's, dad gets angry, everybody gets scared. But the thing is, I think I'd also be like, you said you wouldn't do that again. Game, right? I win. If I'm the kid, right? And for you and I, if our kid said that, we'd be like, fuck, right? So I do think.
Oh, and she absolutely.
Oh, yeah. And
she will let me know.
But in a way, it's good, because I'm like, I think, like you posted that story a while back, like, we're not raising grass. You're trying to help cultivate a voice and a perspective. And that person needs to have a sense of self. And that means that when someone does you dirty, you got to be able to call them on their shit. And you can learn to do that respectfully and in a way that's sustainable. But what we don't ever want you to do is to like lose the ability to go like, that wasn't okay. That wasn't okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not being mean to you. I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm saying that behavior there was not okay.
Yes. And that's between blame and responsibility. Teaching our kids to not blame themselves and pass blame when they make mistakes, but to take responsibility. That's like a nuance that's really hard to teach kids.
Yeah. And like I try to tell Huck that all the time. I'm like, you have to separate yourself from your behavior, in the sense that you are aware that like you made a choice that wasn't good, but you innately are good. Yeah. The choice and the behavior were incorrect. You inside are good. And so we always have to learn how to fight for that, that part of us that's good. But I do think, like, in the end, I think if we ever try to talk about stress, we would probably have to innately avoid like the kids thing, because I think for you and I, we both feel, which is not to say that it is just once you have one, it has to be the largest volume of stress in your life. Like, I don't know a parent that's doing it good. I remember saw this little quote. It was a little bit like cheesy, but it said, the good parents never, like, not this is, again, it's cheesy, but it was like, the good parents will never find that it's easy. Like parenting will never be easy for the ones who are good at it. Yeah. And it's like, and I think that's really true, which is like, good, I think, has so much more to do with effort and awareness and adaptability, ability to transform and shift and change what you're doing. It has less to do with knowing all the right answers, because they change all the time. What they need is different at 5 and what they need at 7 and 10 and so on and so forth. So you can never nut it. You'll never dead nut it. So, but I do think that's where it's like, it's hard to talk about all the other parts of stress, because I think for me, they all pale in comparison. Like, I'm always stressed financially. What's fucking new? Like, that's not gonna, like, that's not a thing to even really talk about. It's like, okay, I try to do everything smart. I started using Rocket Money. I fucking love it. It works great. But I got like a little budget thing, and I'm like, okay, that's that. Or like, oh, I got some stress at work. Welcome to human adulthood. Yeah. Like, of course, work is stressful, right? Like, it's doubly stressful if you hate what you do. I don't. So it's stressful for a lot of reasons, but fortunately not the most important one. Right. So like those conversations for me, it's like, I love them, and I think they are valuable, but it really, and I think I'm kind of like, I got to be honest, like, I wish I can't really talk about job stress in depth. I can't talk about financial stress and death, primarily because I'm like, they're always there. But what's lingering, what is literally like the Everest, it's like those small mountains to like all of a sudden behind them is this Everest. It's like this thing. It's like I made something that was supposed to be here. That didn't ask to be here.
Yeah.
And I feel all the time like nothing else could ever be as like raising a child, and the fact that the universe allows us to do it is a wild and reckless, absolutely illogical, deeply irrational like thing. Because we could all acknowledge, you hold a little like 1 day old baby, like the thing's priceless. You could never put a price tag on this, and you're giving it to me, who is so incapable of fully doing all the like. That's where I think for me,
I'm learning on the fly too.
I mean, when I had Huck, bro, I was 30, not even.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was not a person. I know you got a bolt, but anyways, all to say, like, do you feel, just before we go, I'd be interested to know, because I don't want to minimize that those stresses dramatically impact people's lives, but I'm also really curious to know, like, for you, once you have a kid game, and maybe this is like good advice for people to have kids or not have kids, but like, is there another tier of stress above your children for you?
No. No, it's not even close. In fact, every time, like, Cleveland's been in the hospital a few times for like different stuff.
Yeah.
And every time she's in the hospital, it's like pressing reset. All the things that felt really important don't feel really important. Because the thing about the human brain is it creates problems when there are none. So it's the other thing, back to the original thing about bliss, is bliss doesn't exist because your brain will always create a problem. So, because that's what being human is conquering, right? That's evolution, right? Is the consistent and never-ending ability to continue to improve, and so that you can continue to exist as a species. So, and there's a scientist who I promise you exists in this world who could come and do an interview and tell you why that's happening.
Right.
But that is the reality, is that humans will create problems when they don't exist, which is why insanely wealthy people aren't particularly happy. So, and why we have billionaires, right? There's no reason to be a billionaire. You don't need that type of money. The type of money that you can do, or the type of things you can do in your life when you have 200 million aren't vastly different than the type of things you can do when you have
they're not.
a couple billion, right?
Yeah.
But you'll continue to seek problems. So when life is good, you'll look for things to solve and problems to solve and all of that entails. And so even when things are really good, there's still problems that exist. And then when you have either drastic moments, like your kid goes to the hospital, or even silly things, like we were in the parking lot, we were on vacation recently, we were in the parking lot. I thought that we had a miscommunication. It was my mom, Amy, and I. And I thought my mom had Maverick. My mom thought I had Maverick. We're in the parking lot by the ocean, right? And Maverick just gone. No one knows where he is.
Bro,
it was like 30 seconds.
I would be dead.
Just gone. We're in the parking lot next to the beach.
Yep.
Right? Could be anywhere. And so everyone's frantically looking for him.
Sure.
I'm running around. Like, I feel this deep anxiety.
Yeah, and anvils in your heart. Yeah.
Anvils in my heart. All I can think about is that scene in Minority Report when Tom Cruise goes into the water and comes back up over the water and the kid's gone.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's like a movie that I watched that brings me more anxiety than that scene.
The worst scene I've ever seen in a film, point blank, period, for hardest scenes to watch is it Shutter Island when he returns home?
Oh.
There could never be a heavier weight for me ever.
Ugh.
When I watch that scene every time, I'm always like,
Yeah. Anytime a kid,
the wound of that,
wound of a kid is another one. Since we're talking about just the most deeply depressing movie scenes in the history of humanity,
we like to close on sheer darkness.
What's the movie with Casey Affleck?
Oh, Gone Baby Gone.
No,
that one doesn't end.
Nope.
The Manchester by the Sea?
Yes.
Is that it? Yeah.
Have you seen it?
Yes.
Okay, so that scene too.
Yeah.
When he comes back, that one is like.
Yeah. Epic.
Not a darker experience in the human existence than to be a father in that scenario. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so in that moment, 5 minutes ago, I'm thinking about other things. I don't know. Let's make it up. I probably got some like emails I got to respond to in the back of my head, or I'm worried about like how things are going here while I'm gone. I'm constantly worried about how every month we're going to pay the bills in the business, right? They're just like running in the background. They're like screensavers.
Yeah.
And then you have moments that rock you into reality and help you realize how much you have to lose. And in those moments, you're like, oh, nothing. You could take everything away from me. Everything away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the part of parenthood that is liberating, and that the ability to care so deeply about something in a specific someone helps diminish the things that don't really matter and help you understand what it is like to be grounded in a deep, knowing, unconditional love. Like, there's just no other way to do it.
I think what you said is exactly the thing that we discover that lives inside the hearts and minds of the people that do live in far less fortunate parts of the world, because they know that any day can be the last day with the people they love the most. And because of that, so little matters that to have that moment with your child where they're running and playing in the river right there, and you might just be making dinner or watching them just laugh and sitting quietly. You're like, this is the peak. Yes. This is the peak experience. And because I don't have the ability to think about tomorrow, because it can all go so bad tomorrow because it happens. I mean, you must wake up in villages hearing wailing. You must wake up. You must come back from town with supplies to find tragedies. You must just randomly see people return from a hunt, down a couple or something, and go like, this is the way of life. So every moment keeps you right there because you're like, we only have this moment. So like, it's funny hearing you say it. It's funny how we know it, how we can say like, and then when something bad happens, you know, all of a sudden what matters, we remember. It's not like we didn't know it. It's like,
no, it's like
we
were sleepwalking.
It's like a thing comes over. You're like, oh, this is what's important, and you get stressed, you get worried, and now you're concerned about whether you invested in the right 401k exactly, or if you're going to get the maximized return, or if, oh God, the interest rate on this, or blah blah, or if did you seed your grass with the right thing? Did you whatever? And did I get my kid into the exact right school? Did I get whatever, all this stuff? And then all of a sudden you're like, they're breathing. They're alive. We get to connect. We're doing it.
Yeah.
We're doing it.
And
super hard, dude.
Amy and I, when we're healthy, we have this conversation a lot because we've chosen to live our lives in a way that I think we do make some sacrifices. We ask our kids even to make sacrifices without them knowing it because of like what we do with our finances, what I do with Cathedral, Inspire. And what Amy and I land on a lot is we've got it about as good as it can get. And once you do, I do feel this impetus and responsibility to help as many other people also achieve it. Not in an arrival sense, but in a, as you described, there are plenty of people on this globe who don't wake up every day where losing your kid in the parking lot is an isolated incident, where that fear, that deep-seated fear is an incident. It's a reality. And if I was going to give my life to two things, it would be fatherhood and my family and helping pull as many people out of that reality so they can live in ours. That feels like a thing I'll give my life to, which is why I do. And anytime I'm like, it'd be easier to go work at Amazon and cash a check, there's this thing in the back of my head that says,
which your wife does,
which my wife does. We get the life that brings fullness if we are awake to it.
Yeah.
And as a human, I feel I have this responsibility.
Sure.
And maybe I don't. Maybe I've just made that up in my head. But if I could provide that for two more people in my life, then like maybe I did it.
I think what you're describing is probably one of the most. I mean, it's my deepest held belief, but I think that's the thing is like, it is a theory. It's a way of seeing life. All ways are ways. They're not one's a fact and one's a fiction. All are ways. I think some are more life-giving than others. I think some are more useful than others. I think that one is the most useful. of all the ones I've found. I think it asks the most of the participant, which means that you're likely to grow the most. I think secondarily it has the greatest downstream effects. I don't think there's another ideology that has both of those. I do think there are easier ones, more fun ones that look cooler, ones that have a better style, ones that have a better balance with life, ones that are maybe more hip and less confrontational. There's so many other ways. But I think of all the people that embody that particular way, well, to me, they happen to be like the top 5 human beings who ever lived. Mm-hmm. And I think those human beings, that was their way. Was like, this is the job. This is the work. This is the highest game. And I think that's the problem is once you pick that game, you also subject yourself to dynamic stress of a different kind. Because then even when you're winning financially, even when your kid has no challenges, even when you have all the resources and the money, even when you have all those things, you can't really be happy, and not for the reasons that you might find in another, which is that the internal world's a mess. It's that you're aware that so many other people are burdened.
Yes.
And that no one's coming, and that you're in a position to impact that, which is why the idea of a billionaire is to you so perplexing, because you were like, you are already there. There are so many people who are without even the most fundamental things. How do you not feel tethered and connected? How do you not feel that kind of global human-like stress that ekes through all of culture, that like, we don't have enough, we don't have this, and blah, blah, and yada, yada. And there's like, you read these stories of kids not having food and people's houses. Like, you look at fucking what happened in Lahaina, and you're like, wiped me out. And we have guys from my crews, guys from our department that are there right now with the USAR team doing work down there. And I'm like, I know the men that are down there, rad dudes. In particular, one of them I'm pretty tight with. And I know how sensitive of a guy this dude is. He's a bad motherfucker, but he's a sensitive dude. And I know that he would probably say, if he was here, like, just like that being a part of that's the reason he took the job he did, to go into the worst moment, into the worst spaces on purpose, to share in the suffering and to try to improve and lift that community and those people. And he's been a part of some heavy shit, dude. He's on the Oso landslide. He was on some other really gnarly things. I'm not saying his name because he probably wants his anonymity. But the thing is like, he's done some really hard stuff and been a part of some like that suffering. So you do feel so connected to it. All to say, I think it's cool that you see it that way, because I do think that's why we connect so much as friends, because I see it the same way.
Yeah.
And I also think the part we're not mentioning is, or maybe not mentioning, maybe forgetting is, I definitely don't do it for the reward. But there is nothing I know greater than watching my son reach heights that he didn't foresee for himself or he doubted he could. And secondarily, I don't feel better than when I help someone go from A to B in their own life when they feel lost, hurt, or too weak to do it. That, to me, always feels like best feeling in the world. Mm-hmm. Better than any money you could pay me. And so I think that's where you get addicted to the game of that, where it's like you talk to people, like, yeah, you get addicted to the game of money, and you're moving, and you got this. I feel like I'm addicted to the game of going, like, talking to someone I really give a shit about, and their marriage is a heap, or their kids, there's stressing them, or there's fuck whatever, and then you're there to just be an encouragement and a loving support, and be like, what do I have that I can give you that will help you? What is that? Is it a word? Is it time? Do you want me to take your kids so you guys can go on a date? Do you want to do you need to go out of town for a few days, or do you need to, what is it? And when you can empower someone in that way, bro, the rewards on the back end of that shit are 10 times cooler than anything material you could give me.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same?
Yeah, and I often wish I didn't. But you know what I mean?
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I'll be like, but it feels like...
You ever get on vacation and after like 4 days, you're like, what the fuck are we doing?
I love vacation.
Okay, good. Okay,
I love
so
vacation.
You got a streak of indulgence.
I love vacation. I have more than a streak of indulgence.
But I mean, like, at least it's not like that pious bullshit of like, and I am only happy when I'm doing all this other shit for other people. It's like, no bro. When you're out there on a vacation, you're in Hawaii, whatever.
No, mine's more like once you have the eyes to see, you can't unsee, right?
Yeah.
So if I see suffering or I see pain, I can't not try and do something about it.
Yeah.
Because I can.
Yeah.
It'd be different if I couldn't.
Sure.
It'd be different if I didn't have, a partner like Amy who is willing to make sacrifices to do these crazy, wild things I want to do. Or if like every time I went home and she made me feel bad about the way I spent my time and energy. You know, like there's layers and layers and layers. But now it feels like, and I feel like a lot of America would fit into this realm, and that is, if you have multiple jackets and you walk by someone who's cold who has none, you're not a hero by giving them one of your multiple jackets. It doesn't make you heroic. That makes you just not shitty, right? And that's how often when people say, if people like compliment me in any capacity, be like, "Oh, that's so cool that you do this," or thank you for whatever it is. People probably say similar stuff to you. Yeah. It always feels weird to me because I'm not doing anything that feels above and beyond.
Yes.
I feel like I'm doing.
Oh, for me, it's my
bare
job.
necessity of what it means to be human, which is if you have a lot, you need to give some of it away. So that's all it feels like to me. So it never feels like it's hard.
It doesn't feel like generosity.
It doesn't feel like generosity.
Because you're like, I already had extra. It's not the same.
Yes.
Like, it'd be generous if I had one. Like the way it is when you see a little kid. I always do this test with Huck. Like, he'll have like one little candy, and I'll be like, can I have it? It's always such a test. Like for him, and he'll be like, and I'm like, the fact that you even think about it, is all I need to know. That you have that part of you that goes, I mean, I don't want you not to have it, but I only got one. And I'm like, that's the right kind of tension to feel.
Yeah.
Versus where it's like, I only got one, and I wouldn't fault him at his age, especially at his age. If I said, hey, man, can I have that one? He goes, no, I only got one. But at my age as an adult, if I only had one, I probably would never give it away.
Yeah, I might give you half.
Right, maybe, right?
Let's split.
And the thing is, I've seen moments with him where like he's been that way, where he's just given it to me. Not all the time, but like 3 different times he's like has something he's really excited about, and I'll just right when I give it to him, he'll be like, and I'm like, man, I really wish I could have it. You're just like, and I'm like, can I have it? And he'll be like, you can have it. And I'm always like, that feels heroic.
Yes.
That feels heroic.
Yes.
Because I'm like, dude, it'll make me emotional because I'm like, it's so stupid. It's like a candy or a comic book or whatever, like a little toy thing. But it's that I'm like, I only know that you're doing this because you love me. Mm-hmm. That you would love me, that you'd give me your only one. I would do that for him every day of the week, but 100%. He doesn't owe me shit. Yes. He didn't ask to be here. So like I owe you. So whenever he doesn't, I'm like, man, in that moment, I'm like, I'm always such a believer in humanity because I'm like, we could totally do this. We can totally fucking do this. We just have forgot how to like live this heart. But it does exist, and it takes very little like brain power to access it. And maybe what is the tragedy is we got too fucking smart. You got so smart all of a sudden that you started coming up with clever arguments for why someone didn't have as much as you, or why they ended up in the position they were in, or why you doing what you could do wouldn't make that much of a difference instead of dealing with the thing immediately in your face. You ever meet someone who says that? Like, I mean, if I did that, it would only help this one person. Yeah. As if that doesn't count. Yeah. And I'm like, wait till you're the motherfucker who needs help. Yeah. You're going to be like, if you could just help me, that would be really great because it's really fucking hard right now.
Yeah. And there's a million, I mean, that's a podcast for another day, but there's a million reasons to do that. Everything from capitalism, which tells you if you can get it, you deserve it, to, results-based giving, which is, like I can only give of myself if I know it's going to compound over time. Yeah. Right. So we're not good, which is, like we both come from a little bit of a spiritual background, but one of the really interesting things with like the Jesus narrative and most of our religious narratives is when they do something good for a stranger, they don't follow up. Yeah. They're not like, hey, Mark, get up and walk. And then Mark gets up and walks and he's like, oh my God, this is fucking awesome. And then they're like, hey man, I want to let you know we're going to check in 6 months. And we're going to see where your progress has been. We're going to see what you've done with what we've given you. Have you blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with structuring nonprofits in that way. Yeah. The problem is people aren't products. And we can't expect to be of service only if it creates results. So anyway, we can talk about that for eternity.
Still, but I wouldn't even want to live that way. And I never forget every time I'm generous, I always think about this one C.S. Lewis quote. It's one of my favorite ones all time. And he said that
I already know which one you're going to talk
about. He was like, I went out and there was a homeless man on the street. He asked for, like, I don't remember, a couple because he's in England. And he's like, yeah, he gives him a couple pounds. And the guy's like, why'd you give it to him? He was like, he was going to spend it on nothing but alcohol. And he goes, that's all I was going to spend it on.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that immediate removal of this idea that like
you're
this guy, because he's in this position,
somehow
is deprived of any human desire, needs, wants, whatever issues or otherwise. And somehow because I simply have more money, my interest to drink alcohol is somehow morally permissible. But the person who is somehow destitute, whatever. I'm not saying that that's the wise choice for that guy, but I think that difference of going like, yeah, but it doesn't make him the devil.
It removes a self-righteous ideology in which you are better than, which is the root of much.
Because by that logic, then the only time you can be generous is when you can guarantee that the long-term downstream effects of it are perfect.
Yes,
which is bullshit.
Yeah,
it's a great way to do nothing. It's like, I'm going to do this, and unless it absolutely does 100% of yada yada and blah blah blah, it's like that's not anything. And the weirdest part is that's not how we are with anything in our job, like in our life. You know, like we were talking about parenting and whatever. So it's a fascinating deal. Anyways, we got to bolt. But all to say, I do think, and just to wrap this up, that as always, we always talk about a million things. But one of the big things I will say, and I like recommend it, to everybody. But I also think it's I'm so grateful for it between you and I and in my own life, is that the reason why the loneliness thing probably with my son is so stressful, and the reason why I think you and I have been able to do so much with the lives we have and the things we've done, is because we really have had not just our awesome families and other friends that we have, but we've had one another. And when you've gone through stressful stuff, I've heard from you.
Yes.
When I've gone through stressful stuff, you've heard from me.
Yes.
We've shared in that together.
Or sometimes it's like
my
wife
the only prescriptive thing that I would ever tell another person is, because I don't have every answer for every kind of stress, and like I said, I'm kind of buried in the dad mode, so my perspective is so limited. But I would say for sure, man, like I remember, I think it was like Ep.3 said this, and I think it's so true. She goes, you could make it through this life without a partner, without like a wife or a husband or whatever, or just a partner. You could make it through life without that. You couldn't make it through life without a deep relationship. And I do think the largest factor in my mitigation of stress, instead of just the like medication, the self-medicating of it, because the world is so stressful, dude, and things are really hard. And I've watched a lot of bad things happen and seen them, and I am never shocked when someone's like, I drink all the time, I do drugs all the time, I fucking whatever, I fucked off my relationships, whatever. I'm like, I'm never shocked. I'm like, it's brutal. It can be so mind-alteringly hard. Sometimes I meet human beings that have stories that I'm just like, I don't know how you're alive. And the thing is that the one thing I would say is that what I often see is people that do have friends, they always do better.
And not just friends, but like back to like our podcast we did, I think the last one. Yeah. Friends that know you. So not just like an idea of you.
Yes.
But you've been willing to share pieces of you authentically that then allow them to ask real questions and you to provide real answers, because burdens shared are way lighter than burdens carried solo. And so even the practice of saying a thing out loud removes a lot of its power sometimes. Yeah.
And asking for help.
Yes, that
like
too.
Asking for fucking help. Like I can't imagine if you were like a caveman and you had to be the one to bring back food for the whole tribe. The pressure of that. The first thing I would do as chief is like, okay, it's a hunting group. I need 5 other people to help me do it, because I would die under that pressure of what if I fail.
Well, that's the myth of the lone wolf. The lone wolf is a character that is romanticized in culture and story.
It sounds fucking badass, probably.
But you know what happened to the lone wolf throughout history? They died.
Murked.
They don't exist.
They get murked.
They got killed.
Yeah.
They don't exist. Yeah. So this romanticism.
That's even the ones that are no, that's that Quixote shit. That like even the noble ones, even the ones that are good and see it right and have the pure hearts, like they get slaughtered.
The Clint Eastwood pale rider, that's not a real person.
Yeah.
That person doesn't exist.
John Wicks.
Yeah, they die. They die. They all die because, and John Wick even is like kind of like he does have friends.
Yes, but it's like I'm taking on 400 guys.
Yeah, yeah. There's a reason that movie feels unrealistic, and even they admit like he's gonna need some help, right? Like like they're like
And then Fast and Furious tried to take it on a whole other spin, which is like it's all about family.
It's all about family.
How do you think it went 9 movies deep? It's like because guess what? People can die that and the thing could still run.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. You could still get it. Yeah.
So I mean. Just echoing what you're saying, yes, I think life becomes increasingly difficult the less willing you are to share it with people.
Yeah.
And so some of it's like taking a shot. Like, I'm not good at it, but like, I'm trying to get better at asking for help or reaching out and saying I miss somebody. I've been practicing this like idea of like reaching out to friends that I haven't talked to in a while and letting them know that I value them and miss them. And those are risks, but what it does is it helps you identify who you can trust with your heart and you can't.
Yeah.
Which is scary.
Yep.
Because you might find out that there are people that maybe you can't.
You thought, yeah.
But God, wouldn't you rather know that now? Because the stakes, like we talked about, they get higher.
The stakes get higher.
So let's
bad.
Find out now.
Yeah.
And then go about, you said earlier, like attracts like. And if you want to be known, you are going to have to
actually
reveal
show up in the room
yourself and show up in the room.
Sweet.
All right, man. Thanks for chatting.
Yeah, man. Always.
That was a long one.
That was. It was a good one, though.
Yeah,
I
liked it.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Like, I already woke up at 5:30 in the morning.
I've already done one heroic feat.
I don't want to also now
I got up before 6.
Figure out what I need to do.
Sure.
And so being able to just be like, great, I know that I'm doing this, and I know that I have 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do as much of this in 45 minutes as I can and be okay with it because at least I got something in. Yeah. And like you talk about data, but like the data on like working out is like, if you work out for 10 minutes in the morning, it still creates endorphins and dopamine that helps set you on a different trajectory for your day.
Yeah.
Like 10 minutes is better than 0 minutes.
I
never work out for only 10 minutes, but like
anything's better than nothing.
Yes.
Like, and also too, like I honestly think for most people, if they just took Matthew McConaughey's basic standard, like every time I ask him why he's in such good shape this long, he goes, it's really simple. I just sweat every day. That's my rule.
Oh.
You have to break a sweat. You have to fully break a sweat. And I'm always like, it's the most brain dead shit I ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
And you can get there in 10 minutes depending on how hard you work. You can sit on a bike and just cycle. And if you cycle over 90 RPMs for 10 minutes, you will have sweat on your chest and on your face. And, and then you can get off and your body's like, dope, thank you. Because it also, it's not even so much, I think for me, like, I'm with you on the, like, the part where it's like, it does make your brain sharper and you healthy and all that stuff. But the bigger thing for me is always just like, I see a lot of people in my job who are older, and it is catastrophic when you lose your ability to use your body. And the largest thing that is tied to using your body later in age is using your body.
Yeah. Specifically lifting
all
weight,
the time. Lifting weight, moving, and then moving through ranges of motion. Like, I mean, I used to go, I remember I worked at Zebra Club at the mall. I would go.
Absolutely.
And I would see
mall walkers.
The mall walkers, bro. Yeah. Have I told you this before?
No. Well, I knew.
But yeah, so I would see the mall walkers because they would take the people from the elderly community to the mall to walk in the winter months. And now in Seattle, it's just constantly rainy and shitty. So it was like, this is a great place for them to walk and hang out. And I remember that you would see every different racial group and cultural group like reflected in these retirement populations. And the Asians got everybody beat. They just got everybody beat. And
hands behind the back?
Oh, yeah, hands behind the back. But it was just like they would come in, and it was like they'd walk in, and it was just people would kind of be stumbling. And they'd walk in, and before they even start walking, I'd be like, I'm trying to get into a full squat. I'm going to try to lunge. I'm going to, like, push myself against and off the railing, like push-ups, kind of like standing push-ups. And I'm like, you're just moving your body through every range of motion. So your joints are like, yeah, we've been able to do this forever. We're like, man, you watch them, like someone drop something. You watch an 85-year-old Asian person be able to bend, squat down, and pick it up. If somebody is over 80 and they're white, they're like, I need a hand. Like, I can't get it. And I'm not saying
those
this.
Grabbers.
That's obviously not everyone, but it's like, it's just not a cultural norm to be like, you need to move your body every day and you need to like move it through this range of motion. So that's also where like even on rest days for me, I'm like, I'm at least going to do something where I move my whole body.
Yeah.
Even if it's less than 10 minutes. And I think that's how you really make big changes, bro, is little at a time.